enshrining the memory of a beloved monarch.
And it would be lovely if every village planted a tree.
How history will remember the age of Elizabeth II.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina, reporting tonight from London.
The United Kingdom added another remarkable day to its royal history. Good evening, everyone. An outpouring of emotion was felt across Britain today, celebrating an inspired life. This was the final farewell as thousands gathered to mourn a monarch. The funeral service for Queen Elizabeth II was held in historic Westminster Abbey, followed by a procession where she passed Buckingham Palace one last time. Later, up the long walk to her final resting place in Windsor, where more crowds gathered to say goodbye. Our coverage begins with CTV's chief international correspondent Paul Workman with the pomp and pageantry.
On a gun carriage pulled by 142 British sailors. And so began the Queen's farewell journey. Arms locked together in a slow march from Westminster Hall and her lying in state to the grandeur of Westminster Abbey, just a few minutes away. A return of sorts for the Queen to this iconic Gothic church. Down the same aisle where she was married and crowned Elizabeth II.
Her late Majesty famously declared that her whole life would be dedicated to serving the nation and Commonwealth. Rarely has such a promise been so well kept.
Her life celebrated with hymns and prayers, and touchingly, for another one of her famous quotes, offered to console the nation during the pandemic lockdown, "We will meet again." As the final notes of the last post faded into the Abbey's magnificent vaulted ceiling, the church and its gathering of mourners fell silent and still for a full 2 minutes. At the end, a lone bagpiper playing the traditional regimental lament, "Sleep, dearie, sleep." On the streets of London, a massive crowd waited for their Queen and a procession that would carry her out of the city. Led by Canadian Mounties as a tribute to the Queen's affection for both horses and Canada. Winding past monuments and landmarks that formed a backdrop to the Queen's life, her former staff lined up outside Buckingham Palace. To Wellington's Arch and the transfer from gun carriage to that familiar hearse. Her great-grandchildren, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, taking prominent young roles. Sent off to Windsor with the anthem that marked her reign and is now passed along to her son and successor, the King. Among the many goodbyes seen and heard today, the King left a handwritten one, a note on his mother's coffin that said simply, "In loving and devoted memory, Charles R." R for Rex, of course, Latin for king. Omar.
All right, Paul Workman on this historic day. The royal rituals planned down to the finest detail created a kind of symbolic symmetry today. The very seat where the new king mourned his mother is where she sat alone 18 months ago, grieving the loss of her husband, Prince Philip. Many of Westminster Abbey's seats were filled with world leaders and foreign dignitaries. The U.S. President and First Lady were there, along with the Prime Minister and Sophie Gregoire Trudeau. British Prime Minister Liz Truss was joined by all the living UK leaders of the past, who, at different times, all had their own private meetings with Her Majesty. But this was also a day for the public who gathered to see the procession. CTV's Danielle Hamamdjian reports from Windsor tonight.
The slow, solemn march up the long walk to Windsor Castle was for the people. So many of whom saw the Queen as the nation's grandmother, a member of the family. But 11 days after her death, it was time for Her late Majesty to be reunited with hers. Waiting for her to return home, her corgis, Mick and Sandy. Even her 24-year-old pony, Emma, who's still going strong. In the same chapel where her grandchildren were married, where her late husband is buried, she joins him as the first female sovereign to be laid to rest here. Inside, 800 people filled St. George's Chapel. Among them, the prime ministers of countries of which she was head of state, and her staff, past and present, loyal until the end.
Here in St. George's Chapel, where she so often worshipped, we are bound to call to mind someone whose uncomplicated yet profound Christian faith bore so much fruit.
Removed from her coffin, the imperial state crown, the orb and the scepter. The symbols of what were once her power and governance.
The merciful goodness of the Lord endureth forever and ever.
After a life of public service, this is the last we saw of the Queen. Her coffin was lowered into the royal vault as the sound of a last lament, played by her piper, echoed through the 15th century church, just as she requested. Away from the cameras and the public eye, the Queen was buried this evening in a private, small ceremony alongside her late husband, Prince Philip, and her beloved parents and sister. Omar.
Together again. All right, Danielle, thank you. Moments before Her Majesty was laid to rest, the pin-drop silence in the chapel broke for one last parting ceremony. The breaking of the wand. Lord Chamberlain, the senior-most official in the royal household, marking the end of his service to the monarch. And it was a sense of duty and pride that drew crowds from Canada to witness their Queen's final journey. Here's CTV's Genevieve Beauchemin.
Mourners huddled around phones along the procession route, watching the ceremony fit for a queen. For the Queen, they said.
It's history. I want it to be part of history. I just want it to pay my respects.
For the moment of silence, London stopped. A silence broken at Wellington Arch at the site of countless royal processions, including the Queen's coronation by the arrival of the Mounties, 4 riding horses given to the Queen as gifts by the RCMP.
The Mounties. Oh, we were so proud to see the Mounties are coming. The Mounties are coming.
They all knew around here that we're Canadians, so they were all like, "Your guys are coming. Your guys are coming," and then to have them lead and stay here and kind of oversee the whole procession.
Also among marchers, Canadian Armed Forces personnel, part of a Canadian contingent, each feeling the weight of history with a proper tribute to the Queen.
I felt very proud. I think we were all aware that we were part of history, and we've been in a period of mourning in the CAF, in the Armed Forces, but it's also been a period of reflection. And we've looked back on Her Majesty's service. We're in the business of service in the CAF, and there was just no greater example.
Sharing their collective grief, mourners joined their voices to sing God Save the King. And together applauded those who served the Queen today by honoring her memory. Though many walked and stood for hours today, saying they're emotionally, physically drained, some mourners lingered late into the London night, wanting to stretch out this final farewell. Omar.
All right, Jen, thank you. Not everyone got the opportunity to be a part of history. Christina Heery was the last person from the public in Westminster Hall to bow before the Queen. And seconds later, the Lady Usher of the Black Rod paid her respects, fighting back tears before closing the service. Here's CTV's John Venevelli Rao on the outdoor gathering for the goodbye.